I never thought that a foot fetish would be a crucial character motivation in House of the Dragon. Then again, this is Westeros. Speaking of which, did you know that someone has taken photos from my private Facebook page, snipped them so that they narrow in on my feet, and then posted them to WikiFeet, where I now have a star rating for my feet? Why? House of the Dragon, Episode 9 was not what I was expecting. You know, like, Episode 9 in the Game of Thrones world is famous for being the exciting, the disturbing episodes that everything has been leading up to. The Red Weddings, the Ned Stark deaths, the Tyrion duels, the Battle of the Bastards. And this was, compared to those, relatively low-key. Not to say that it was bad, but you know, I was definitely feeling that the whole series was leading up to this moment where Viserys died. And then when he did, the storm clouds were meant to break. But instead of lightning flashes, it just kind of rained a little. How did you feel about the episode? Let me know down below. I mean, knowing what happens in the books has definitely warped my expectations of what was meant to happen in this episode. I mean, I was fully convinced that episode 9 was gonna be Instead, we mostly had a chase throughout the city to see who could find Aegon first and make him king, and then Rhaenys girl-bossing the small folk. I suspect that I'm going to have to wait till episode 10 for the stuff that I am super excited for. And I mean, there were definitely beats in this episode that I think the writers felt they really needed to tell before we got to that stuff. Part of the reason this episode surprised me is that it's quite different to the book in a lot of ways. In some positive ways and some others that I'm pretty neutral on. Again, Fire and Blood is written as a fake history book inside the world of Westeros with all of the historical biases that entails. So, let's break those down. This episode was about Alicent's agency and taking what is yours. First off, Alicent's agency. House of the Dragon, right from the beginning, has really been exploring how much agency and control over her own life Alicent really has, and the moral and emotional implications of that. And this was the first real episode where she kind of stands up to Otto, this guy who has been kind of puppeteering her life in so many ways. The man who has been, as she says, moving her around like a piece on a board. It's almost like now that Viserys is gone, she can sort of emerge out of that shadow and into her own position in a way, without Otto and without Viserys. This is one of the best decisions I think they have made in this adaptation, because in the books, she is painted as just this cruel, jealous, unsympathetic stepmother character for whom all of these things can be blamed on. This is, of course, and I've talked about this before, those historical biases that mean they kind of ignore the lack of agency that Alicent and a lot of women in these stories have. And they attribute to her a lot of things that she may not have necessarily had a lot of control over, you know, because these people have been manipulating her life since she was a child. The showdown scene in this episode where she tells Otto, "I have only ever wanted what you have told me to want," is just such an amazing character moment for her. I have wanted this for so long, and it's so good to see. But still, Alicent finds herself at the center of events that she can't really control, and all she can do is hope to steer them in a better direction. Namely, you know, not killing Rhaenyra and all of her children, but also trying to maintain a better position for herself in the midst of all of this. And Rhaenys calls her out for that. You know, she says, "Haven't you ever imagined yourself on the Iron Throne? No. Nah. You just want a nice window in the walls of your prison." And this is another layer of commentary to what Alicent is doing here, to what these power structures more broadly do to people who don't have a lot of power. That rather than challenge the system, it's easier to support it and perpetuate the harm it does, carry it on to the next generation, become a part of it so that you can find a better position for yourself within it. I don't want to vilify her for that. I think that is a really interesting nuance to her character. You know, it gives her a strength, but in an interesting and different way that we often don't see. It doesn't mean what she's doing is right, you know, especially because it's mixed in with her genuinely believing that Viserys really wanted her Aegon to follow him as heir, or at least she's convinced herself that that is the case. And all of these dynamics really come out in the secret meeting at the start of the episode, the Green Council. Now, in the books, Alicent is portrayed as not only one of the main instigators for this whole conspiracy to put Aegon on the throne, but the murder of Lyman Beesbury, the only man who speaks up for Rhaenyra. It tells us that she wants Rhaenyra dead, saying, "Mayhaps the whore will die in childbirth." And one account suggests that Alicent even poisoned Viserys because this was the opportune moment to strike, to put her son on the throne. And while obviously she does want to put Aegon on the throne, like, it doesn't absolve her of blame, we do definitely see that it's a lot more complicated than that. Not only does Alicent have pretty much nothing to do with the murder of Lyman Beesbury, but she stands up for Rhaenyra, saying that they're not going to kill her and her children, they're going to give her peaceable terms to steer this ship in a slightly better way, away from violence. And beyond that, there has been this whole conspiracy going on around her, led by Otto and Tywin Lannister, that she was not aware of, but of course, the book very much paints her as a big part of. But the histories, they look back on these events, and they see Alicent, the mother, trying to put her son on the throne, and then her right-hand man killing someone, Criston Cole, and they just say, yeah, it's all her, she's all evil. One of the really interesting things, though, is that the main account of the Green Council is written by Maester Orwell, who is the Maester at the meeting itself. And he lies. He makes up what happens. The Grand Maester was present at the meeting and took part in the council's deliberations and decisions, though it must be recognised Orwell was most anxious to cast himself in a favourable light and absolve himself of any blame that was to follow. He painted himself in the book as one of the people who defends Rhaenyra, instead of the Chad man Lyman Beesbury. And of course we see in the show that he is one of the people party to this conspiracy. I will say that the way that Lyman dies in the show isn't as interesting as the way he dies in the books. Having it kind of be an accident after he shoves him down into the chair and smashes his head on the table, but it doesn't have the sharp, motivated, tense edge of ordering the death of the only dissenter in the room that it does in the books. The closest account is that Criston Cole shoved him down into his chair and then opened his throat with a knife. Again, it's kind of that feeling that things were a little bit watered down that made this episode feel not as tense or exciting as I really thought and expected it would be. But it doesn't really fit with Alicent or Otto. Ordering Lyman's death straight up like this probably wouldn't have worked with the characters that we have in the series at the moment. So I understand why they changed it. A couple of other details. One, in the book, apparently all of the conspirators swear a blood oath. They cut their hands open and bind themselves together in brotherhood. And two, one detail that you probably missed was that the crown's gold has been divided up. It's being shipped off to the Bank of Bravos, to Old Town, where the High Towers live, and to Casterly Rock. That's an important detail that was just very quickly passed over, but it is going to come back. But after that, the episode centers around this kind of competition between Otto and Alicent to find Aegon, because Otto wants to make Aegon kill Rhaenyra, declare them as outlaws and rebels, while Alicent wants him to spare them, to offer her terms, a kinder way out. Her being the only one to insist on dealing with Rhaenyra in a kinder way endears us to Alicent in a way that, again, I think is really, really important. I was surprised by how much time they spent on this hunt for Aegon, because I didn't really remember it from the books, but it is in there. There's 2 paragraphs, and they talk about how one version says he was found basically with a child, and one with a paramour. Point is, he's awful. But again, this hunt for Aegon was kind of low stakes to me, so it was feeling a bit more like that light rain rather than a storm. But let's talk about taking what is yours. Helena, Aegon's wife, is a dream seer. She can kind of feel out the future, and she's a little kooky because of it. I love her character. Every scene she is in, I'm just like, oh, darling, I love you so much. At one point in the episode, she says, "We are fated to always want what others have," and this is a sentiment that keeps coming up in the episode. Aegon is meant to take the throne, but in true Jon Snow fashion,
I don't want it.
And this is because, Aegon feels like everyone hates him, even his dad. He feels useless, he feels like a failure. And that's because he is. He's a hated, useless, suitor-for-nothing imbecile whose entire childhood could be found at the bottom of a bottle. Aemond even points this out, he goes, "While you were drinking and partying, I was studying the blade." But again, we see this parallel between him and Daemon. Daemon also has many of the attributes that are traditionally associated with being king. He's decisive, he's charismatic, he's smart, he's a great warrior, he's a dragon rider. And Aemond himself, he has the largest, oldest dragon in the world. He wants what is not his, and Kristen even tells him, I know what it's like to want what others are freely given. Aemond is easily a standout character. He steals every scene he is in. I think he's going to become a real fan favorite, and I loved the moment where he just contemplates letting Aegon go so that he could maybe be king. But then we get the coronation, and Aegon kind of nervously, unhappily walks down the aisle until he hears, the small folk cheering for him, and he begins to love the adoration, the power, the suddenly everybody approves of him. Everybody thinks he's the best damn thing in the entire world. Take that, Mum. They all love me, even if you don't. And hell hath no fury like a little boy who was never taught any manners. I know that we're meant to hate him, but come on, he does look really cool with the crown and the sword. I've spoken before about the importance of symbols in the Targaryen line. And so when they were doing this ceremony, a nice little detail is that they were trying to use as many symbols as possible. They didn't just use Viserys' crown, they used the iron and ruby crown of Aegon the Conqueror. His name is Aegon. It's meant to create this lineage, right? Then Alicent gave him the cat's paw dagger that Viserys always had on him. They did it in the Dragon Pit, this symbol of Targaryen and Valyrian authority and power. They were doing everything they could to legitimize this guy's rule. Secondly, we have Larys, who wants something that he cannot have. A foot. I was watching this going, why are they focusing so much on the feet? It's like they're oh. And Alicent knew, right? She knew that was what he wanted. She looked away so he could. She knew that this was payment for his services. Thirdly, we have Rhaenys, who wants the throne, or at least Driftmark, for herself. And Alicent, who I don't think wants power, but this episode is definitely about her taking a bit of agency for herself that she's never really had before. I don't think it's about power for power's sake. It's more about that agency and control over her own life. I don't want her to go down the path of desiring power, Cersei style. I don't think I'd like that. Then we have what is pretty much the biggest change from the books. Rhaenys taking control and smashing through the dragon pit and killing a bunch of people. This was a change from the books, and I say a change because this is not the sort of thing that would just be omitted for historical biases. Not when it's at something like a king's coronation, or it's being witnessed by 100,000 people. A rival dragon interrupting the coronation, threatening to kill the king, killing a bunch of people, and then flying off. I mean, that probably would have shown up. While I think the moment looked amazing, I think they could have handled it differently, though I'm not really sure how. How did you feel about it? Oh, and speaking of which, speaking of Helena, the goddess herself, she has been saying over the last couple of episodes, beware the beast beneath the boards. And I thought they were talking about all these simmering family tensions, but no, it was talking about the beast beneath the boards, Meleys and Rhaenys, who are right about to girl boss the hell out of the small folk. Really great foreshadowing either way. I am really excited for episode 10 because I think it's going to be what I thought episode 9 was going to be. But we shall see. What did you think about the episode? Let me know down below. Stay nerdy, and I'll see you in the future.